Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Cloud Security Session, Arab Security Conference. Thanks for attending the session. I'm glad to be part of this prestigious event for the cybersecurity in the Middle East. Hopefully this session will be informative for everyone. I've got a couple of questions on the application, the whole application. I encourage everyone to submit any question. And then by the end of the session, I'll have like 10 minutes for questions. And also I'll be engaging with everyone on the application in case there's any question that's not answered during the session. So my name is Ahmed Nabil. I'm currently a regional information security manager in one of the leading financial institutions managing the Middle East, North Africa, and Pakistan area. I was a previous security architect, a chief security architect, and a CIO and CISO on different companies. And I'm a member of the AC Council, CISO advisory board, as well as an MVP and RD from Microsoft. These are my social media contacts, and I would love to get in touch with everyone after the event. It's very important to build the community of the security. So the session, today's session is about the cloud security. And I believe you have seen a lot of sessions in this event or other events. It's a very hot topic nowadays, and I'm trying to add a couple of insights based on my experience and based on my journey with the cloud about the cloud security. So when you think about the cloud security, I think the first thing that comes to mind, are we late with cloud security? So it's 2021 now, and we are discussing the cloud security. Are we late? Yes, I think we are a little bit late if you're now just checking the cloud security. I delivered this kind of presentation like a year or 2 years ago, and every year I'm adding to the pack new acronyms and new stuff about the cloud security. Every year it's evolving with more and more platforms, with more and more this acronym as a service that's increasing time by time. When you think about the cloud security, we need to understand what's our role in the cloud security, because we are the ones who drive the strategy, we're the one who build the architecture. And in order to do this, we need to understand all these kind of acronyms that are coming. SSPM, CSPM, SMP, CASB, CWPP, the architecture, the SASE, all these are coming every day. And we need to understand this because we need to ensure that our company or our corporation is in the right place when it comes to the cloud security. One thing to understand about the cloud security is that cloud security is built by human. It's run by human, and it's maintained by human. And because we are humans, we are not perfect. So is the cloud. So people think that we are moving to the cloud, all our problems are resolved, and we don't have any issue. However, again, always remember that this was built by human, and human are not perfect. When you think about the cloud, the basic idea, what is a cloud computing? What's the definition of cloud computing? And then the basic definition comes from the NIST. When you think about the NIST, you're going to see things like the on-demand self-service, the broad network access, the resource pooling, the rapid elasticity, the measure services, and all kind of these nice things. But do you see anything related to security? So the cloud was mainly done, and by definition, to resolve these kind of problems. But is it the right place always when it comes to security? And the question is, by moving to the cloud, are we secure? A couple of examples that I would like to share in my talks. The first one was Capital One. So where the personal information of some 100 million individuals were stolen from the Capital One's hosted AWS cloud state. And when we think about what happened in Capital One, a lot of people speculated that this was perhaps a result maybe for an attacker or maybe an internal threat that's been living inside the corporation, or maybe a zero-day flow or something like this. However, it looks like, no, this was not the reason, but it was mainly a misconfigured WAF, so a misconfigured web application firewall that was misconfigured with an excessive permissions that allow the attack to come. So think about this, the misconfiguration. So moving to the cloud doesn't mean we are by default secure. If you're not configuring our services correctly, if we're not doing it in a correct manner, most probably we will be vulnerable to a lot of attacks. So moving direct to the cloud doesn't mean we are secure by default. This attack actually made AWS change a lot of their settings and a lot of their verifications for the WAF, for example, to avoid such kind of attacks from recurring again next. Even starting this year, early this year, we found what happened to the Mimecast, which is one of the famous solutions that's protecting our emails. So the hacker stole the digital certificate, which is provided to customers to securely connect their Microsoft Exchange account tenants to use the Mimecast. And when you think about this, your customers on Microsoft Azure using Office 365, and there's the third party, which is the Mimecast, that's providing the service. And then after a lot of investigation, we knew, as per Mimecast, that this was the same threat actor that came behind the SolarWinds hack. The SolarWinds hack, if you remember, the famous one that ended in December 2020. And the problem with the Mimecast was one of these things. They were able to steal the credentials, these certificates, and become internally between the traffic to the Office 365 and Exchange. How this might be prevented? A lot of things. You need to think about how you can do a better key protection. And then we're going to discuss this. So going to the cloud and picking any encryption, this does not mean that you on the right thing. You have to think about maybe different kind of encryption. You have to think about different encryption softwares that will help to protect your keys. Thinking about the transparency when you go to these kind of connections, you need to understand what are the external connections. I'm going to Microsoft, which is another external, and then Microsoft I'm connecting to Mimecast, which is another external. So what are these external connections? What are the dependencies between them? We need to understand how crucial these are for us. And then third, we need to think about third-party security management. So as a CISO, one of the main pillars in any CISO program, any driving strategy for you will be going with a kind of a third-party security management. This is very crucial nowadays if you're thinking about the cloud or anything, because you're depending a lot on the third parties. So moving to the cloud doesn't mean that we are totally secure. No. Yes, we are having a lot of options that we can leverage, but that doesn't mean by default we are secure. When you think about the evolution of the IT threats and security, thinking about back in the old days, mainframe and PCs, I'm a little bit old, maybe some of you didn't witness this, but all these things when the main threat was just having some kind of viruses or some kind of worms. And then we started moving to more about the monetization of attacks and getting some kind of driving money from this. And then went to the platform security, and then went to data centers, and then the mobile, until we ended up with the cloud and the Internet of Things, all those kind of things. And when you go to all these kind of things, the attacks have changed. Now sometimes it's driven by countries, as we have seen in a very, very recent attacks. And it's leveraging a lot of very, very advanced tools that enables them to leverage the cloud itself and devices like the IoT to run the attacks on our infrastructure. And then you think about when I ask a lot of people, are you on the cloud? So are you in the cloud, totally native cloud, or you are a hybrid cloud? And most of the people, and I think this will be remaining at least for another couple of years, we will be running a kind of a hybrid cloud. So it's very difficult to be a fully native cloud unless you're a very new startup, maybe, or a new company that's born inside the cloud. But most of us are transforming and moving to the cloud will most probably have this kind of two scenarios, which is the hybrid cloud. And when you think about the hybrid cloud, we're talking about two perimeters: the identity perimeter and then typical normal network perimeter. Back in the old days, you have the network perimeter, and with the network perimeter, you're mainly protected by the network. When you go to the work, you have the fences, you have the office, and then you have your internal network, and then after you have the internal network, you have your own maybe LANs and all this kind of thing. This is kind of a network thing. You're protected by the network. But when you think about the cloud, the main protection is the identity. Your identity, your username, hopefully your MFA or biometrics or whatever, are the core things. If these are bypassed or breached, all services down. And that's why it's very crucial to think about this. How long this will happen? This will still be there till we reach finally what they call it now, the zero trust. Another acronym that have been pushed all over the way, which is the zero trust, where going through anything, you need to be verified. The applications, the network, everything will be verifying you at each step to ensure that this is the right account or the right connection, and you have the right privilege to go through through it further. Quick observations about what's happening in our threat landscape. Threats are increasing in volume and sophistications. That's true. And the most important things is that we need to ensure that we are ruining the return on investment for the attackers. We're going to discuss this later as well. We cannot stop all attacks. Definitely we cannot stop attacks. So we need to balance between the investments. So even if you're spending millions or billions, yes, you're limiting these attacks, but you need to think about some kind of compensating controls. So you need to think maybe about things like the business continuity, the resiliency, the backups, especially when it comes to something like ransomware. So we need to understand that we cannot stop all our attacks. Integration is required, but complex and costly. One of the main headaches all the CISOs, all the CIOs are facing the enormous number of applications that you're using. And the problem is how to integrate all this kind. So they're having a DLP from one company, an endpoint from another company, using the cloud from third company, and then integration is really, really big hassle for them. Complex and costly, but it's very important because you will avoid having any blind spot inside your organization if you're able to fix this kind of integration for all your applications. The cloud changes security. That's true. When you think about the cloud, yes, it's secure platform. So most probably, the ones that invented the cloud, AWS, Google, Microsoft, they have done a lot. And they invest a lot in securing their data, securing the data centers, securing the applications that will be used by you. Maybe definitely better than what we are doing on our own private data centers. They have the resources, they have the tools. The better visibility, of course. Automated routine hygiene. All these kind of things are one of the benefits that we know about the cloud. But when you think about going to the cloud, there's some requirements that you need to think about it. There's some learning curve that everyone needs to go through it, which we'll check later. The learning curve. You need to understand the shared responsibility. So in the example that we have shown in Capital One, going to the cloud is not secure. You still, yes, they have the WAF, they offered you the WAF, but maybe it's with the default permissions. Maybe you need to do some kind of reconfiguration to it, to customize it to your own environment, which is one of the very, very important things. The identity and access hygiene. We mentioned the dual perimeter, remember. Identity is core. This is the only perimeter that you're using. You need to focus on identity. I cannot think of anyone now going to the cloud with just a username and password. Minimal, at least you need to be using your MFA, the second factor authentication, or the biometrics, or maybe using all these new techniques about the passwordless and all these kind of things. Big changes when thinking about this is the identity and access and the no permanent privilege. We've heard a lot of things about something called the just-in-time access. So back in the old days, you used to have this kind of administrator that is 24/7 the domain admin or the database admin or whatever admin inside your organization. There's no need now to do this. So when you're sleeping at night after 6 or 7 p.m. till the next morning, you're not using these privileges. There's no need to have this privilege attached to your account. And that's the main thing. So when you need the privilege, you are eligible to go and get the privilege. But if it's not needed, then it's no necessity to be attached to your account. This is very important because it limits the time where the attacker can go and hack your account and find the permission always there with you. A very core structure when you think about fundamental thing, when you think about the cloud, which is the customer and the cloud share responsibility model. In a nutshell, I would focus on three things. If you're using the top model, which is the SaaS, the software as a service, then you have the full responsibility on your information. The cloud provider will not help you with this. The identity, this is a core for you as well, the identity, and the devices that you're connecting to the cloud. These are the main three pillars as per the cloud customer shared responsibility that you need to focus on when you're going through your journey to the cloud. Key challenges and strategic opportunities. Again, as we mentioned, identity-based attacks are up. We need to focus about the identity. This is the main core thing which you need to focus when going to the cloud. Again, the information, of course, and the evolving techniques. And as we mentioned earlier, most enterprises reporting using more than 60 security solutions. Integration. At least get solutions that can easily integrate to each other. A very famous example I always say about the DLP. It's very difficult now to live with the DLP that's not able to integrate with your endpoint, for example. How are you going to enforce the DLP actions on the endpoint or on the mobile device on the MDM if they're not talking the same language together? And this is one thing. So what if the DLP, for example, found some kind of leakage of data? Is it able to take action now and block this data? Is it able to take action, for example, and block the USB on your device? Is it able to block it on your mobile device? They need to talk the same language together. They need to integrate with each other. And that's the problem when it comes to the multiple tools that we're all using in our environments, which we're all facing. Quick points. When you think about the information protection, remember we mentioned the three pillars: the information protection, the identity, and the devices. Think about the information protection and the data governance. How are we able to label, track our data? How are we able to implement some corporate policies? When you think about the information protection, we need to think about a few things that we need to do. First of all, we need to think about our data. Where is our data? This is the first question. Where is it located? Where is my structured and unstructured data? So one very important thing, when you're thinking about information protection or IRM products, you're buying one of these products, is this product is able to label and classify structured and unstructured, or only think about one of them? Is it able to access all kind of format, PDFs, Word, native databases, or just one or two formats? This is one of the things. What about the full life cycle? It should pass through the full life cycle, which is discovering the data. So it can maybe you can connect it to your file server, to your database, to your SharePoint, to your email server, and it start connecting and getting all this data to start classifying it. So the first thing is discovering, classifying it, and this classification can be based on certain criteria, maybe certain words, certain dates, based on permissions, whatever the controls that you're putting to classify. And then after you classify, you need to protect based on this classification. So let's assume you're classifying things as maybe public, internal, and confidential. So for the public data or the internal data, you're not putting some kind of controls. But for the confidential, you're putting some kind of controls, like the access permissions or maybe the encryption. So based on the classification and the outcome coming of this, you're going to add the protection layer, which is maybe, for example, the encryption. The cloud, which is one of the best things, you can add a lot of things. One of the nice things, for example, the geolocation. So if it's classified, for example, I'm allowing it only to be opened from Egypt or from these networks or from these countries. If any other connection came seeking this file or this data, it will not be able to open this file. And then you're going to monitor after this. You're going to monitor, see who is accessing this data. So for example, I'm giving this data to someone in Egypt or in UAE or in Saudi. I'm expecting it to be open there. So if I saw, for example, that someone is opening it from Russia, from US, or from China, then this might raise a kind of flag that something suspicious is happening. So after I've done all of this, I need to think about the integration again, the full ecosystem, which is the DLP integration. So if I saw something confidential going out from my organization, and when I mean going out by organization, I mean something going out from the firewall, from the proxy, from the web to Google Drive or OneDrive, going out from the USB on my machine, going out on the mobile. All these are the exit points for my organization. If I find something like this going from these exit points, then this is a challenge that I need to think. Without integrating all these together, I will not be able to get this. I will not be able to see it. And that's the problem. So this is some quick insights when you think about the information protection. Identity. When you think about the identity, so again, as I said, I cannot believe that anyone now is going to the cloud without MFA. This is the basic. When we started the journey for the cloud, most of the cloud providers were mentioning that MFA should be enabled maybe for the admins only. But now this became a full necessity for everyone going to the cloud, having an MFA. A second factor authentication, which can be an SMS, can be a message, can be something coming on the phone, can be a token, something like this. And then there's a new technology now, a lot of people moving into the passwordless, which is the authentication with your own biometrics, by retinal scan or fingerprints, all these kind of things. Till we reach something called the zero trust, as we mentioned, which will be based on the endpoint state and our behavior and all this kind of thing to give you the access to the applications. So if this is for the normal users, what should I do for the admin and privileged users? Again, this is another thing you need to think, which is where acronyms came like the privilege access management, privilege identity management, the PAM and the PIM solution. Things like the privilege workstations. So someone with a privilege, so his account will be a privilege account added into a privilege account management system. And that's why I think of the IAM program, the whole identity access management program. And by default, he will not be accessing his data from the same machine that he's used to access the internet or the email or this kind of things. He'll be accessing it from a different machine, what we call an admin machine. So these are things, so this is the full solution. So you need to think about the PAM, the PIM, the implementation. It should be a cloud database, a cloud system that connects to maybe to on-premise system. What kind of system I should pick? What is the break the glass process that will happen if, for example, this system went down? How can I get around it, break the glass, similar to what happens in a fire? What about the PAL, the Privileged Access Workstation? How can I limit them? Can I limit them by geolocation, for example? This is what's called the IAM program. And then the third important thing when you think about the identity is the third-party account risk. So back in the old days, if someone is working as a vendor for your company, the easiest thing would be creating an account from your company. If I'm in a company called XYZ, I'll be creating an account for him, guest at XYZ, till he do the work, and that's it. And sometimes when it's finished and done, these accounts are not maintained properly. These accounts are not deleted, and you can expect all kind of things happening with these accounts. So you need to think about how we can leverage the new technologies like single sign-on, the SAML, business-to-business application, where we're not creating any new account. I'll be asking him to log with his own account. However, I will enforce my policy. So for example, I will say, yes, you can log in with your organization account or your Facebook account or your Google account, whatever. However, my requirement is to have MFA. So when he tries to log in with his account, he will be asked to create an MFA to be able to log in to my network. In this case, I'm getting rid of all this kind of maintenance thing that I've been doing for all these accounts previously, these living accounts that have been in my environment for a long time. Clients, PC, mobile devices, main important thing, a full unified endpoint. We have on our environments, we have Linux, we have Macs, we have Windows, we have iOS mobiles, we have Android devices. We need to think of a cross-platform security management solution that spans all these kind of things. We need to think about an advanced endpoint protection. And this advanced endpoint protection comes with what they call it an MDR or an EDR, the detection and response capability that will detect based on suspicious activities and have the post-breach detection, automated investigation, response. And very important because with the automated investigation response, if something hits you, you can easily isolate it, for example, and exclude from the network and go further. So these are kind of things that you need to think about when you're thinking about the client PCs and mobile devices. SOC. There have been a lot of sessions here about the SOC. And when you think about the SOC, we have a lot of challenges when it comes to the SOCs. The analyst overload, the poor investigation, the workflows, manual integration. So we need to think about how we can help, because the main problem why SOC fails is that when you connect the SOC or your SIM solution, and then you start connecting all the resources all of a sudden, you find enormous hundreds and thousands of alerts coming every day. So you need to think about something about proper educate decision about your incident response recovery. Thinking about a real SOAR solution, which is about the orchestration, about the response about this. So it's not only about the SIM, but having the SOAR to build your full SOC solution. You need someone to do the investigation and save some time from the analyst, at least for first analyst. So only the critical ones are going to the analyst, which can work in it or escalate it for the next layers. Another thing is that we need to integrate these SOC tools as well in one platform. So if you're having a cloud SOC, you need to ensure that this cloud SOC is able to collect all the events from your on-premise environment, from your on-premise SIM, from your on-premise tools and devices. This kind of integration that we are looking for. A lot of customers, a lot of clients are not using even one cloud now. We're using a multi-cloud. I've been giving a session recently about the multi-cloud environments. So this is one thing you need to consider. You might be on Azure, for example, but you have some other services in Oracle or in Google or in AWS. So you need to ensure all these are flying by and going into your one SOC solution so that you can manage this SOC solution in a better way. When you think about the SOC reference model, this is the operating model that normally work better in your environment, where you have the SOC analyst, and this SOC analyst tier 1 and tier 3, and then you have the incident management. And then the most important thing that we are thinking about here, it's the mean time to acknowledge, the mean time to remediate. That's the core thing that we are thinking about. How you're going to ensure that you're identifying this in a proper time and you're remediating it in the same allowed time. This is the most important thing. So the incident management team will be bringing some of these business stakeholders, legal experts, privacy, compliance. These are experts that you need to get them with the incident, because not all these incidents are only about security, about technology. And this team will be able to help you immediately assess this kind of breach. Understand, do you have any regulatory maybe impact on this? Is it spanning some other business function? To understand how these stakeholders can add, and then you can take some kind of actions based on this, as you can see later on. In this in between, you'll be getting a lot from investigations, external content, leadership, some technical details that will help you as well with your identification. IoT, operation technology, another thing you need to think about. A lot of us now are using IoT. I've been working in a lot of industrial companies in the power utilities and as well in the oil and gas. And with these, a lot of people are depending on the IoT devices and the sensors. And when you think about these kind of things, these microcontrollers and these devices are delivered in millions with no security. Some of them are installed with their default passwords, with their OEM things. Nothing's changed. There's no monitoring for them. There's no pen testing done for a lot of things, and they're just left like this. And the problem, as you can see, is that these sensors or these technologies are working in our what they call the critical infrastructure. And the effect of these on the critical infrastructure. They can easily down a power station or a main rig or an oil field, and this is very crucial when you think about it. This is a new field that's coming, and there's a lot of things about the industrial controls that can be done to protect these kind of things that we're seeing nowadays. When I think about the cloud security tools, one of the most important, when I delivered this session, I think 2 years ago, there were only one or two bubble 0, 1, 2 acronyms. We have now the cloud providers, the CASB, the CWPP, the CSPM, the SSPM, the SMP, all these kind of things. So this is very important to understand what these things are doing. So when you think, for example, about the CASB, when you think about the CASB, which is the famous thing, which is the Cloud Access Security Broker. This broker, which are fitting between us in the on-premise, for example, and the cloud security to form some kind of an enforcement point. When you think about the CASB, I think of it as a firewall, the firewall or the proxy between the on-premise and between our, for example, cloud solution. It's very important. When you think about, for example, the cloud workload protection, this is defined by the whole solution, the targeting the unique requirements. So we need to ensure that, for example, we need to protect. We need to have some kind of antiviruses to ensuring that this antivirus is installed and configured. We need to have some kind of controls. And then you think about things else like, for example, the CSPM, which is your posture. This is very important, which tells you exactly what's your kind of posture. So on a score, for example, from 0 to 100, what's your current posture? Based on what? Based on, do you have these controls or not? For example, based on, do you have this MFA applied for all the users, or 50% of the users, or 100%, and then give you a score for this? Do you have the antivirus covered on all your machine, for example, the Linux and the Windows machine? Do you have the network segregation? Do you have the encryption applied? All these kind of things. This will give you a kind of a posture about what you're doing, which is very, very crucial when you think about, this is my posture, this is what I'm doing. A very nice slide here that had been in one of the latest Gartner papers about the positioning of these cloud tools. So when you think about the cloud, as you can see, and you have the SaaS and IaaS and PaaS, and then you have all your providers. These are the example of the providers in the SaaS, and these are other providers in the IaaS and PaaS. And then you have something. And that answers the previous question. We said that going to the cloud doesn't mean that you are by default secure. You are having the basic layer of the security. And then you have the advanced security layer, which will have the CASB, as you mentioned, which is stretching between the SaaS and the IaaS. We have the CWPP, which will be mainly for the IaaS, which will have the posture management, which will have something called the SASE. If a lot of people heard what about the SASE, which is the new emerging cybersecurity concept. And this concept is coming by default by Gartner, by the way. They came by this concept in, I think, 2019 or 2018. And the main discussion with the SASE was that we have a lot of existing network approaches and existing technologies. And these technologies that we have in our networks are no longer providing us with the level of the security that we are looking for. So we need to have some kind of immediate actions, to have some kind of immediate uninterrupted access to our users, no matter where they are located. Whether they're located in a different geolocation, where they're located in something. So this is very important, especially with the increase that we're having now in the remote users. After what happened in the Corona, the COVID, there's a lot of increase in the users, the remote users, and how they're working together. So this is very important that the SASE, checking the data flowing between the cloud services and the on-premise. Think about the SASE as your WAN, the conversions of your WAN. Think about the conversions of the WAN and the network security. And it looks to what's happening in the CASB and other technology. So these are the advanced securities that we need to consider looking at these kind of things. On top of this, of course, we have the people and the process. The people and the process who are driving this, as I said from the beginning, creating your architecture, checking what service you have, what tool you're going to use, where is the inputs and outputs, what are the services, what are your clients, what are the platforms, and based on this, derive this kind of architecture. These people and process that will be able also to do the cloud risk assessments for you and get the results about what's happening on your implementation of the cloud. Very nice, very intuitive one about how things are arranged when you go to the cloud security. Now quickly, let's think about some of the drivers or challenges that we're having, or the best practice when you go into the cloud. We mentioned a lot about the risk assessment. So when you think about the risk is an integral part. It's a very major, I got a lot of questions. I think there have been questions about the application. Should we go to the cloud or not? So it's not about I'm going to the cloud or I'm using this latest device or this latest technology because this is the super fancy thing. I've seen a lot of scenarios where cloud is not the best option. Actually, you're losing a lot of money and you're risking your business. And there's a lot of scenarios that cloud is really the best option for you. So you have your own risk assessment. You need to ensure, think of it in a different way. Think of it, what will be your main reasons to exit the cloud? This exit strategy that you're putting it will be also how you do the risk assessment as well. So that's how we need to think about it. Think about the risk assessment versus your business. We are not living in a different island. We are supporting the business, and that's our main reason for existence. We need to support and align and drive the business and let the business achieve his goals using us and leveraging us. So you need to think about the risk assessment. So any process that you're doing, setting any strategy for the cloud, you must ensure that you have taken all the possible risks, such as, for example, the security, such as the third party that we mentioned, such as the availability, such as, for example, in a highly regulated industries like the banking and the pharmaceuticals, they have a very stringent compliance requirement. This is changing a little bit now in our region, but it's one of the main risks, and that you need to do an assessment. Are we allowed to go or not? So this is one of the most important things that you need to think about when you go to risk assessment. When you think about the cybersecurity, being aware of the risk and being thinking of the risk, you need to ensure that you have a plan to address this kind of risk. You need to communicate this kind of risk, and you need to ensure that your policies reflect this compliance and security. When you think, the common question someone will be asking about how much is enough. So should I pay, like, invest 100,000, 200,000 a year? So this is what we think about, is how much is enough. This is the efficiency. And then when you think about how we are doing it well, this is the effectiveness. When you think about the effectiveness, how we are doing it well, I've mentioned a little about, which is increasing the resilience to attack. We have two important things. We need to increase the cost of attack. We need to ensure that if someone did an attack on us, it's very costly for them to do the attack. That's why they call it, we need to ruin the RFI. If we made it, for example, very, very bad investment for him to do an attack on my network, most probably I'm going to lower the number of attackers who can reach me. And at the same time, if someone was able to attack me, if someone successfully happened, then I need to ensure that I'm decreasing the mean time to remediation. So this will involve something like the business resiliency. This will involve something like the backups, the business continuity, and all these kind of things which you need to think about. This is the effectiveness. And then when you think about the efficiency, which is how much is enough, what is your current risk appetite? Important. What's the level that this organization is willing to accept? Think about yourself. What is the level that I'm willing to accept? And if I'm not willing to accept beyond this, then what I'm doing? What is the mitigation effectiveness? Think about things like insurance process, going back, having third parties. These are all kind of things that you need to think about to ensure that you're running an efficient thing. And then after applying these mitigations, you need to ensure that whatever is remaining is still acceptable, because there will always be some kind of exposure. So we need to ensure that this is still acceptable for us. This difference between the efficiency and the effectiveness. You need to understand that most of our attackers, they have some kind of supply chain for them. It's very simple. So the threats that is coming from these attackers, it's coming from an interconnected ecosystem. We are not able to do, as a defenders, this ecosystem. Attackers are able to do this kind of interconnected ecosystem. So it's not only a single attack, or not just a haphazard attack, but it's a grouped attack. And sometimes it's a state-funded attacks as well. So behind most of these attackers, we have this supply chain, which sometimes they call it the black market, or the criminal market, or the gray market services. Quick sample, quick numbers that I'm providing here about the ecosystem. When you think about something like denial of service in the black market, denial of service attack is costing like something like per day like $100. Per month, it's costing like $760 or say $1,000. So this is a very, very minimum number. If you're thinking to hire someone from a black market attacking you for 1 month doing a denial of service attacks. So these are kind of things that are really, really threatening us that we need to think about. How can we break this kind of supply chain for the attackers? How can we stop from doing this? Because unfortunately now, the attack services are becoming inexpensive, and it's easy to be leveraged or utilized. Cybersecurity is a challenging place when you think about this risk. It's very hard to quantify. The mitigations done in an early way. I'll give you a very, very common example. GDPR now is asking 72 hours or less for any breach to be notified. Think about 72 hours, 3 days or something. Sometimes the normal, I think you've heard this in different sessions, sometimes take like till 8 months till you discover that you have a breach and you have an attacker. GDPR requiring 72 hours breach notification. Some other regulations in the region are requiring 1 hour to notify them about this breach. So it's becoming now problematic to identify its breach itself. And there where it comes, all the things I've been discussing about the SOC, the SIM, the SOAR, the integration of the tools, leveraging the high security standards. This is very crucial to ensure that there is no blind spots inside your organization that you need to check. This all is the cyber resiliency. Think about the cyber resiliency, one of the main core things when you're going inside the cloud. With the cyber resiliency, you need to have the right mindset, you need to have the right cloud technology, and you need to have the hygiene, which is how we're gonna lower this kind of over risk, how we're gonna identify the well-known risk and burn them down. Key measures of success: forget the cost of attack. We need to ruin this cost of attack, make it very costly for the attacker, and the mean time of remediation. We need to focus on our business continuity, we need to focus on our resiliency, we need to focus on our other things that ensure we can recover. Another challenge or driver, which is the cost. A lot of marketing people will be approaching you. The cloud is the best thing for you. You need to go to the cloud. You're gonna save a lot of monies. So as you can see, this is how you believe the cost will happen. But the reality, this will happen. When you're starting deploying the cloud, to go up a little bit, and then goes down later on the cost optimization. And why this happening? Because first of all, the cloud is not the right place. We mentioned this several times. So let's assume you're using one CPU, for example, and using it for the next 6 years. So this will have a higher cost for you. So one CPU, and you're using this for 5 years continuously. And then versus you're having 100 CPUs for 1 hour. So that's the difference between the cloud and on-premise. So sometimes to be not realistic for you to go to the cloud. If you're using this in your on-prem, it might be cheaper in your on-prem. You already paid the advance payment for the on-prem machines. I've witnessed this in one of my previous employers. We have been doing a lot of mass processing activity. This mass processing activity is done only like 2 or 3 times a year. And it requires like super fast computers, like a terabyte of RAM, a lot of processors, hyper-threading, all these kind of things. And we are only running this like for 3-4 times a year. And when we run this, it lasts maybe for 2 or 3 days till it finish processing of this process. When we moved to the cloud, when we moved all of this process to the cloud, and I was able to spin for them, instead of 1 terabytes, multiple terabytes and multiple processors, they were able to finish it from 3-4 days to 3-4 hours. And I'm paying only for these 3-4 hours instead of paying for the whole amount of the servers and the maintenance of servers and the backups and all these kind of things. So it's very important about thinking about how things. So we need to ensure that we're picking the right thing. And the next thing, why you're seeing this is getting high, because we need to do a lot of things in our applications. We need to modernize them. We cannot just do this kind of shift, lift, and shift, and then move our things from the on-premise and move it to the cloud. We need to modify it. We need to ensure that it's modernized. Things that maybe doesn't have a single sign-on, the application code itself. That's why we're having some time and cost. That's why it's increasing at the beginning before moving our applications to the cloud. A very, very good example is Netflix. So our applications are not scaled out and not designed for elasticity. Think of Netflix. Netflix will run few CPUs, few machines when people are asleep and people are not able maybe to use all the services. And it will be using thousands of CPUs when people are binging and starting to watch a lot of Netflix movies. So it's very important that our application is designed from scratch to do this. Our enterprises, our corporations have hundreds, if not thousands of applications, and we need to re-engineer all these applications to be elastic, to be modern. And this will cost us if we're moving to the cloud. Just lifting and shifting, this is not an answer when you're going to cloud. That's why the cost is something you need to think about. Remember also we have something which is the cost skills in itself. The skills of the on-premise, people need to learn a lot of new skills before going to the cloud. So you'll be investing in people, maybe hiring, training. So these are kind of investments that you're doing as well. And that's why it's getting higher a little bit at the beginning before going down. So what we're seeing, this is the marketing thing at the top. The reality is what happened down at the bottom. Think about the changing of the roles of the IT, the roles of the security people. So we need to think about, we are changing, our roles are changing. So think about differently about someone providing something, the provider role, and someone operating something. Someone going deep details and something managing something from top. So it's very important that we need to understand that we are changing. The role is changing of the IT when we're going to the cloud. This is one of the challenges. We cannot do whatever we're doing before in on-premise. And that's why there's a requirement to upskill our knowledge, and our skill set as well need to be changed from what we're doing before, because at least if you're doing, for example, the IS, the cloud is taking a lot of things out of you and you're focused on specific things, and that's what you need to think about it. Think about the provider versus the operator. Think about the third party. You need to manage now the third parties. These people that are connecting now to you, the people that are dealing directly with you, like the cloud providers, you need to manage them to ensure that no risk is coming back from it. You need to validate and vet your vendors and the solutions. And that's a changing role, a huge changing role when you think about the IT. There's different routes when you think about the clouds. So when you think about the cloud strategy and some policies for the cloud computing, it's very important to differentiate between the routes. So are we, for example, rehosting an application? Are we thinking about rehosting? Lift and shift? Are we refactoring the application? Are we replacing an existing system with a system in the cloud? Are we releasing some kind of new process? Are we reimagining the new system going to? You need to understand what is our route to the cloud. And based on it, for each of these scenarios, it makes sense that we need to move through what the company wants to approach and document this and understand which scenario that we're looking for. Sometimes they call this as a playbooks. This will be your playbook to the cloud, which need to be documented when you're going to the cloud. To overcome all these challenges, industry leaders need to focus on some kind of 4 key imperatives, which is creating a customer-focused enterprise, increasing the flexibility and streamlining of the operations. This is very important. We need to streamline the operation. Here comes the integration, all these kind of things. Driving the innovation while managing the cost. We need to deliver new services. Everyone now is calling the agile thing, being agile. This word is now important in everything that we are doing now. What does it mean? So I'm delivering new service quickly, but with reasonable quality. decreasing the cost per transaction, and driving our competitive differentiation between us. So we are all going through transformation. A lot of companies went out of the market because they were not able to adapt to this kind of transformation. So we need to compete. Now we are competing, unfortunately, with startups, with young, fresh, small startups. If you are not able to compete with this, it's very difficult. Even the traditional business, even the banking, for example, system is changing whole total now to pure e-banking systems. Everything is adding to the e-thing, the electronic thing before it. So if you're not able to provide this new service and gain this advantage and competitive differentiation, we're going to lose the battle against the new entrants in the market. We need to optimize our enterprise risk management, as we mentioned, to maximize the return on equity, the fraud, the mitigate operational risk, while achieving, again, the compliance objective. The compliance is very crucial, especially in our countries, because a lot of regulations are coming, regulating and mandating how you're going to treat this cloud. A lot of changes is happening now, but I mean, you need to think about it. One of the main challenges when you think about the cloud, for example, is the local cloud providers like Microsoft and AWS who are opening their own now data centers and Oracle in our countries. And people are thinking, okay, that will solve all my compliance and I'm going to this cloud directly without any problem. But the question now, this cloud provider who's opening in Egypt or Saudi or UAE or Bahrain or whatever, this cloud provider is replicating most probably to other services and other cloud data centers. How about this replication? Are we aware of this dependency and this kind of transfer? So these are kind of things that we need to understand and think. These are the kind of skills that we need to look when we're going to the cloud and thinking about the cloud for our own organization. Very crucial and important thing when thinking about cloud, how we select and monitor our cloud provider. Very important. I'm going to give a few examples about some of the frameworks, but I mean, selecting the cloud provider. So when we think about the third-party security management or security assessment, and it's very common that you can assess, you can see the contracts that have this very famous clause about the right to audit and going to audit these kind of things. But when you think about the cloud, I think it's very difficult for us to go and audit Azure or AWS or Google unless you're a multi-billion company investing there, or maybe the defense ministry or something like this. But how can I assess the compliance? What are the tools I have about? Is it mapping all my compliance requirements? What about the assurance? Is it helping me really to go through the organization needs? So you're going to find a lot in AWS and Azure. I've seen a lot of reports that's telling you, now we're helping you, for example, to be PCI DSS compliant. Now we're helping you to be NIST. Now we're helping you to be ISO certified by having this kind of tools. They issue even a report on your posture on the cloud telling you what percentage of controls are sufficient or fulfilled from this kind of regulation versus the other regulation. Alignment, when you think about the business model, does this provider, this cloud provider, compete with my organization? Is it similar? Is it some retail advertising? What about the data ownership? What about the data that I'm putting there in the cloud? What options are we having? So back maybe 4 or 5 years back, when they started having the data hosted and they have the encryption, for example, the encryption keys were coming directly from the cloud. And a lot of cloud providers will tell them, no, I want to use my HSMs, which are the hardware security modules, where I can control my own certificates and have them with me. You're going to find either they're not allowed or you're going to lose a lot of services if you're using the HSMs. A lot of things have changed, of course, in the recent year or two. But this is one of the things that you need to think about when going to the cloud, which is falling under, again, the security and privacy. Very crucial thing. Think about your cloud provider. Again, when I mentioned the multi-cloud, a lot of organizations, especially the big corporates, are using now multiple clouds as a kind of a failover. So they're having, for example, AWS and Azure. So if you're having this kind of multiple clouds, then what is the technology and the architecture that you're using in one of these clouds? Because at any point of time, you're required to move all your services from Azure, for example, to AWS. So if you're tight with Azure and using their own proprietary protocols, their own proprietary software, so at any point of time, you are now fully tied with them, with Microsoft Azure. You cannot move to AWS. So if this is a requirement for you to have a multi-cloud, then we need to think about what are the technologies, and then where comes the architecture. What kind of technologies I should use to move my data easily to the cloud. Things like Dockers, for example, and all these kind of things. This will allow me to be quick, easy, light, and I can move my data and my applications and my infra, for example, from one cloud to another cloud. Again, this is one of the things. Think about this when you're picking the cloud provider. Is it forcing you to use its own proprietary applications, data, software, or you're allowed to use some kind of a common thing that allows you to move and hop between one cloud and another? This is very important question when you pick your own cloud provider. The architecture, going from the having no cloud till the implementation, starting with the cloud strategy, cloud policy. A lot of companies that I've seen, they don't have the cloud policy itself. So you need to understand what's my strategy. And this is aligned, of course, as mentioned, with the goals of the organization, the complexity associated, what's requirement. And then you can move to the identifying and prioritizing the workloads. I'm not moving everything all of a sudden. I need to identify exactly what I need to move and why I'm moving it. I'm moving it to drive maybe some data, to drive some traffic. What's the main goal for moving, for security, for resiliency? What's the main determination for moving this workload? And then determine the cloud deployment. So based on this, I'm going to go use SaaS, PaaS, what kind of things? What are the SLAs provided? And then starting having some kind of business case and then preparing for the implementation. Very crucial to ensure that we are moving in the right direction. Last but not least, when you think about the cloud security and governance, if you're looking for cloud security and think about some of the standards of governance, of course, you have the ISO 27001, which is the most commonly used frameworks globally, which have a generic set of security controls, which is not intended mainly for the cloud. And then this is amended by the 2717 and 18. And these are the most commonly think when you think about this, because they supplement the 27001 and 2 by more security control and practice for the public cloud services. The 27018 will identify more controls for the protection of the personally identifiable information. And then when you think about the NIST special publication 800-144, which have a lot of controls when it goes to the cloud. And then when you think about the US Federal Risk Authorization Management, the FedRAMP program as well, which is very important. And then two of the most important things that we need to check about, which is the CSA, which is the Cloud Security Alliance GRC stack. They have very two important documents and standards need to look for, which is the cloud control metrics, which includes all the controls that are used for the cloud. And the beautiful thing about it is these controls are either identified for IaaS or PaaS or SaaS, and these controls are mapped even to other standards, like this control, how it's mapped to the ISO. So if you're having, for example, an ISO standard, how you can map CSA to it and can find the differences and apply the difference. If you have NIST, for example, if you have PCI, if you have HIPAA, all these kind of things. And there's a lot of mappings coming from a lot of the Cloud Security Alliance chapters in our region. I've been working with one of the chapters, and we're trying to align as well the cloud control metrics with one of the main region standards. And then we have the CIQ, which is the Consensus Assessment Initiation Questionnaire, which is go to the STAR, where I invite everyone, please check the STAR, understand. So when you pick, again, this is going back to how you're going to pick the cloud provider. So you're going to see you have something called STAR Level 1, STAR Level 2, and STAR Level 3. STAR Level 1 is based on something called the Consensus Assessment Initiative Questionnaire. So if I'm a cloud service provider, I'm going to the CSA, I'm telling them, okay, I want to be STAR. The first thing, STAR level, they're going to give me some kind of questionnaire. So this is self-assessment. I'm filling it. So I can fill yes for everything. This would be STAR level 1. And then you go to STAR level 2, which means that someone came and assessed what you have said. So this is assessment from someone external. And when you go to STAR level 3, then this is about how you're maintaining this afterwards. So look about your vendors about in this STAR registry database, identify whether it's STAR 1, STAR 2, or STAR 3, and going further, that this can be checked. And finally, business and users are going to embrace only technology if they can trust it. If they can feel it's secure and they can trust this security, all our businesses, all our functions that we are advocating will be able to embrace it and use it. So few recommendations, few important recommendations that we need to work on, which I see a lot of people that are not doing, which is develop an enterprise cloud strategy. And this cloud strategy should follow what we're doing in the business strategy. Very important. Establish our policy. Implement and enforce policy in the cloud ownership, responsibility, and risk. Follow a lifecycle approach for the cloud governance. Think about the cost optimization. It's not just cost saving because it's cloud. No, we need to think about our own specific scenario. Think about the organization expertise. Do we have the expertise that can run this or not? Think about the resiliency and the backups, what we're doing in case something happened to our data. One of the key things that we are having here, the connectivity, at least with the cloud. Think about the portability, being able to move from one cloud to another cloud in a very easy and seamless fashion. Again, cloud selection and monitoring, which is one of the most crucial and important things. That's it for me. Thanks a lot. I think we're on time. I have a couple of minutes to take some questions. Let me check the application. If there's any questions coming. So we're having a few questions here. So what's the most important challenges when it comes to data security? I think the most important thing that data will be somewhere else. We need to think about the IRM solutions, how we're going to classify, discover, encrypt this data, and think about how we're going to exit as well. If you want to, so one of the famous things when you think about the encryption, so if you're encrypting data inside the cloud, one of the most famous things called crypto shredding. So if I'm encrypting things and then this data is already in the cloud, I'm not sure whether they made a backup from it or not, but it's encrypted, that's what I know. So if I want to destroy this data, I cannot destroy it because I don't know if they have backups everywhere or not. So one of the things which is crypto shredding, which I'll be destroying the key itself, encrypting it, so no one can open this data again. Again, do you recommend moving to cloud computing for the Egyptian banking sector? Again, this depends about the process itself. Yes, there's some process that will highly benefit from moving to the cloud, while others are not. Again, risk assessment need to be done. Can advanced encryption methodologies, two-factor assist in moving to the public cloud? Yes, it might help. Two-factor authentication is a must from my point of view. Encryption is a must from my point of view if you're moving anything cloud. Remember, you're putting your data with somewhere else computer, and in this case, you need to ensure that this is highly secured with it. I believe we need to have a way for the data in the cloud that every time it's being viewed, opened, or even one click right to trace the event. This is what is said by the IRM. When you classify the data in the cloud, this you're giving, for example, permissions to Ahmed or one another, and then they are the only people who are able to view this data. Anyone else cannot open this data. And that's why the ARM is very good, that protection. So I mentioned things like the encryption. Another usage of the protection is limiting the access. So only one user can open it, and only he can open it maybe for a specific point of time. If you remember old Mission Impossible Tom Cruise, when he received this kind of messages and it just exploded after 5 seconds, I can give someone an access and a permission to use one of the documents of my data for maybe a week or a few days, and then after this, the access will be revoked. How can I know if I'm secure on the cloud? We mentioned something called the cloud security posture management. Most of the cloud vendors will have this, so you can run this kind of report and see what's the status of your cloud controls, if you're fulfilling them or not. Is there a standard that provides security cloud environments using blockchain? Yes, there's a lot of things. Check what I've mentioned earlier. In the standards and governance, and this will be sufficient for you. Can I build a SOC team in private network not connected to the internet? So I'm not sure about this question, but if you're looking for the cloud, they need to be connected to the internet. Your SOC solution, yes, can be on premise, but need to have access to the cloud as well. I think this is most of the questions, and we are hitting our time. So I'll be checking my application, or if anyone wants to reach me by chat or my social media, I'll be really glad to take this conversation on another level. And I would like to thank you all. Thanks for the organizers, have been doing a great job here with everything. And thanks for everyone who attended the session. Thanks a lot.